This is why always in yoga, Brahmamahurtam you should be up. You get that point during twilight to some extent. What kind of suffering they're going through in 1 year or in 1 day, you don't have to do anything. If you're just alert and looking, they have misunderstood instruments of survival or as instruments of knowing. The greatest predicament that a human being faces and the greatest tragedy that human beings are going through and the greatest struggle that all humans seem to be toiling with is just this. Their sensory perception gives one-sided perception. If you see this, you can't see this. If you see light, you can't see darkness. If you hear sound, you can't hear silence. So, life becomes a heap of opposites or contradictions. Trying to wade their way through these contradictions, how much suffering, unbelievable. How much confusion, how much struggle. If this nearly 8 billion people, if you document what kind of suffering they're going through in 1 year or in 1 day, just 1 day, it's enough for eternity. All this is simply because they have misunderstood instruments of survival or as instruments of knowing. You must know which is light and which is darkness if you want to walk through this. You must know which is man, which is woman if you have to operate in the world. So these differences are very one-sided. Just being a man or a woman, how much circus in the world? Forget about light and darkness, that's more complicated. Gender is the simplest damn thing, but how much struggle, how much social confusion, how many religions and scriptures have been written about this misunderstanding endlessly. This is just that because between light and darkness, you think they are two different worlds, because it looks like that. The day looks like one kind of world, this planet looks different during the day. During the night, it's a completely different world, but it is not, it's the same world. I think you get that point during twilight to some extent. This is why it's always important to wake up before the sun comes up, because you don't have to do anything. If you're just alert and looking, slowly the perception will go into you. This is why always in yoga, Brahmamahurtam you should be up because twilight starts then. In twilight, if you're awake, you perceive that the differences that you have made out in your mind because of misperceptions of senses that you have settles within you. When that happens? When? When a man is woman, bird a flower, red is blue, life, death, twilight.
Namaskaram everyone. Now we all heard from Sadhguru that what actually Sandhya Kala is and what happens during Sandhya Kalas. Now let us look at what happens when we practice any yoga during Sandhya Kalas in our body and how it can be hampered if we perform the yoga in some different temperatures during the day. Now moving forward, during Sandhya Kalas, around sunrise and sunset, everything is in a state of flux. We all heard from Sadhguru that if we practice our yoga during that time, our ability to transcend limitations is better because our life energy are in a state of flux. Now when we do our practices, any spiritual practice, all these practices create a certain amount of ushna or heat. Heat not in terms of temperature, but one of the three aspects, the other ones being Shita and Pitta, that controls various functions in the human system. If you have excess ushna, or in other words, if your samat prana is high, then you feel that your body is hot. But if you take your temperature, then it is normal. That means ushna is not like having a fever. It is an experiential heat that develops during any spiritual practice. Now, Samat Prana or Saman Vayu is in charge of maintaining the warmth of the body. A yogi always wants to keep the body slightly on the warmer side because heat also indicates intensity and dynamism. If the body cools below a certain point, then it creates inertia in the system, and therefore almost all the practices are designed to take you to a somewhat higher realm than what people normally live at. When our energies is at higher realm, our body will function at an easier pace. It can be proved in a matter of just 3 to 6 weeks. If you do certain practices and get your energies to a certain level, then your physiological factors will settle down and go at an easier pace. On the other hand, when our energies are low, then our body tends to go at a higher pace to keep the life process going, which will deplete the system. So, if our bodily functions go at a certain speed, then our mind will go crazy, and above all, it will reduce our lifespan. Not only this, one should do the spiritual practice during Sandhya Kalas because we are conscious that doing practices will raise the ushna in the system. And if the temperature outside is high and the ushna rises beyond a certain point, it will cause cellular damage. That is why yogic practices are always to be done in a cooler hours of the day, that is during the transition period, that is Sandhya Kalas, that reduces the frictions within the system, and therefore the practices will generate less ushna. And because yoga evolved in tropical climate like in India, we always said that all the yogic practices must happen before 8:30 in the morning or after 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the evening. If you haven't watched the video of Sadhguru talking about this, you can watch this video. I have given the link in the description. You can watch after completing this video. Now moving further, if you are looking for dynamic spiritual progress, you must do your yogic practices before sunrise, which actually means starting the practices in Brahmamahurtam, which is at the last quarter of the night, anywhere between 3:30 to 5:30 or 6 a.m. or whatever is the timing of sunrise at your place. In that time, there is a certain process that we will become naturally conscious of our practices in a certain way. And most importantly, if you want to be a being of the future, it is necessary to remold the fundamentals of who you are. That is what we are trying to do with yogic practices. We want to remold ourselves into something entirely different. And so, the best time of the day to do this is always Sandhya Kalas, when the energy on the planet are going through a certain transition and the friction within the system is greatly reduced, which allows the remolding to happen more easily. There are many other aspects to it too, but these two which I talked about is the most fundamental reason why yoga should be practiced in Sandhya Kalas in the morning and in the evening. Now, winding up the video, the Brahmamahurtam is the best time to do practices if we are really wanting to transcend the physical nature or know dimensions that we refer to as spiritual. But if we are simply looking for our physical health, then Sandhya Kalas around sunrise is the best time to do practices. Both of the time we are in great benefit. So now hope you will do your practices in the proper timings, that is in the Brahmamahurtam or during Sandhya Kalas, which will prove to be actual beneficial for you. Otherwise, why to waste time? So now hope you loved the video and found it meaningful, and if yes, do not forget to give it a like, share and subscribe. Up to next, stay safe, healthy, happy, and namaskaram.